Hello, I'm Conrad Bourne and I'm Director for Special Educational Needs here at the Mercy Trust. Today is part 2 of our 6-part SEND CPD series. And you can find all Mercy Trust CPD on the Mercy Trust YouTube channel. Today we're going to look at this often used phrase in the SEND world: every teacher a teacher of SEND and every leader a leader of SEND. And we're going to talk about its relevance 10 years on from the 2014 reforms. Then we're going to look in part 3 about questions about whether a learner does have SEND or not, and what is the difference between learning progress and learning need. And in part 4, we're going to look at the importance of identifying primary need. And in part 5, what are successful outcomes for SEND learners and preparation for adulthood. And in part 6, we're going to look at creating learning environments that are ambitious for SEND learners. Just a quick heads up about further professional qualifications in SEND that will be available from September 24. There is a new national professional qualification for special educational needs coordinators, and that will be introduced in September 24. And we're very hopeful in the Mercy Trust that we will be able to offer that to aspiring SENCOs and those who are looking to develop a professional interest in SEND. Our recently produced Trust Blueprint for Leadership and Culture highlights our purpose, our mantra, and our key principles. And our key mantra is that all our students should be able to live life to the full in pursuit of what is good, right, and true. And this is a particular challenge for SEND learners as they face increasing barriers with their complexity of needs as they move forward into early adulthood. Indeed, recent employment data shows that only 4.8% of learners with an education, health and care plan are in sustained employment. That is employment of 2 years or more between the ages of 18 and 25. What an incredible waste of talents for our young people, and what a challenge that is for us in the Mercy Trust to improve that outlook and picture for the students that we work with. Just a quick recap. In session 1, we introduced a legislative framework around SEND, and we looked at the SEND Code of Practice. And in particular, Chapter 6 relates to schools, although it's worth having a good look throughout the chapters because there is relevant information across all the chapters for practitioners in schools. So if you haven't already done so, just pause now and download the SEND Code of Practice, and that'll be a reference document for you to keep throughout the sessions as we move forward. So what does the SEND Code of Practice say about teaching? Well, in Chapter 1, it talks about teaching of high quality that's differentiated and personalised. And that teaching would meet the individual needs of the majority of children and young people. However, some of those learners, those who don't make expected progress, they may need additional to and different from provision. And these learners tend to become categorised as those with special educational need. And let's remember, for those learners, there are different categories of those learners. So there are learners that SEND support, often referred to as K learners, which is a SIMS designation. And then there are those learners with education, health and care plans. And the key difference is that those with an education, health and care plan, they have a statutory document which codifies their provision. And at SEND support, the provision is mainly via that in the classroom, and these are not statutory documents. At the start of this presentation, I posed the question as to whether every teacher a teacher of SEND and every leader a leader of SEND was the appropriate phraseology to use now, as we are 10 years down the road from the last SEND Code of Practice, and we've moved more towards using the phraseology of inclusive schools. And in some of the language in the Code of Practice of differentiation of personalisation has been replaced with adaptive teaching and ambitious curriculum. But in some areas, we still see that the Code of Practice has high relevance. So when we look at outcomes, in particular in Chapter 6, that all children and young people are entitled to an appropriate education and one that is appropriate to their needs, promotes the highest standards and fulfills their potential, enabling them to achieve their best, be confident and live fulfilling lives. Again, one of the key mantras of our our trust blueprint, but also that successful transition into adulthood. And that is a key aspect of our work moving forward in the Mercy and Trust. How do we successfully transition our young people into the most appropriate provisions as they leave us and move on into early adulthood? So I'd just like you to pause and think about this question, that in the absence of a specific phrase, and the specific phrase does not exist in the SEND code of practice, every teacher is a teacher of SEND. Why has this phrase found common use? And what does it actually mean to you in your everyday practice in schools? Perhaps a better reference point for us when we're thinking about our work with SEND learners and the inclusion model in schools is the teacher standards. Setting high expectations, promoting good progress and outcomes, demonstrating good subject and curriculum knowledge, adapting teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all our students, making accurate and productive use of assessment, managing behaviour effectively, ensuring good, safe learning environments and fulfilling our wider responsibilities. Of course, teachers need to set high expectations for all students, ensuring that they make progress and achieve their full potential. So what additional information do we need to know about our SEND students to best inform us? School clearly communicates and reinforces with stakeholders expectations for behaviour, standards and participation, and what is expected of them in terms of effort, behaviour and achievement. And I'd recommend looking at the widest group of stakeholders in this. So parents, carers, students themselves. Be consistent in enforcing expectations. Consistency helps establish a sense of fairness and predictability in the classroom. Positive reinforcement of behaviours can be a powerful motivator for students to maintain high standards. Challenge students with high standards. Make it clear that you believe in their ability to meet and exceed these standards. Let's banish the language of bottom set. Let's banish the language of SEND learners who may not be able, we may think cannot achieve. Everybody has potential. Everybody can learn. Demonstrating a commitment to pupil success sends a powerful message about your belief in their capabilities. Creating a supportive learning environment where students feel valued and encouraged can significantly contribute to their success. In terms of promoting good outcomes, these are all shared questions. What are the primary barriers to learning? What are they good at and find more challenging? What is a starting point in the curriculum? And how effective we are in answering these questions is a delve into how effective we are in sharing information between teachers, pastoral and SEND teams, or even wider, parents, pupils themselves. The accuracy with which pupil needs are identified and planning is in place for SEND learners is critical. If information sharing and planning is good, we see early intervention where there are barriers to student progress and the greatest opportunity to reverse any barriers and achieve success. Ineffective systems and processes will have a significant impact on SEND learners. In some of our schools, I've seen excellent practice. I've seen excellent practice across the board. In one of our schools, teachers meet regularly and talk about a learner that they all teach. Talk about what's happening with that learner, the ebbs and flows in their learning, the complexity of the challenge that they face in the classroom with that learner. They share approaches in the classroom that they use. They share materials and they share a language and they share a commitment to that learner to achieve the very, very best. When we think about demonstrating good subject knowledge and curriculum knowledge and adapting and responding to the strengths and needs of all students, this is the key challenge for us as educators, but because what we are asking is for the delivery of the curriculum that supports the SEND learners' accessibility to it, which will vary across the curriculum depending on the complexity of the learner. So a successful approach in learning in one subject may not be as successful for the student in another. Therefore, we advocate the use of a multi-sensory adaptive learning approach wherever possible, applicable to both the academic and the pastoral curriculum. This approach recognises that individuals have different learning styles, and incorporating various sensory modalities can enhance the understanding and retention and the overall learning experience for that young person. Let's just consider some of those approaches. Visual learning. What visual aids do we have within the classroom that can support learners? Prompt cards, use of colour-coded materials, auditory learning. What are the opportunities to hear the materials and the resources? Tactile and kinesthetic learning. I recently was in a school and saw an excellent approach to teaching World War One, where the teacher, in the absence of being able to take the learner to a World War One battlefield and have a reenactment of soldiers, tried to create this within the classroom. The student was blindfolded as they placed their hand within a box, and this box had moist earth in it, and within that earth there were relics and artifacts that the teacher had used to try and enhance the learner's experience. The teacher also used mood music from the period, to support and try and enhance the learner's experience. Assistive technology improves by the day. As the organisation has now moved all our schools onto the Microsoft platform, within the Microsoft platform there is a whole suite of assistive technology resources at your fingertips that you can use for learners. We've talked about adaptive instruction and understanding the starting points for our learners. And again, opportunities for real world applications, visits and trips and so on. Another sensory element can be olfactory and gustatory, where we incorporate smell and taste to enhance learning. For example, using scents related to a historical era, or incorporating tasting in a lesson about cultures and cuisines. Assessment should be used to inform teaching and support students' progress. Teachers must be able to assess and plan for the specific needs of learners with SEND. Effectively using assessment data for SEND students is crucial for next steps planning, early intervention, adapting approaches, and to reaching endpoint destinations. Assessment should be more holistic and incorporate a variety of elements. A nihilistic element should include the academic and observational and content and work reviews that the student produces. Consideration should always be thought of and always be given where required to assessment adaptations that can support students to achieve their best outcomes. And these can include access arrangements, but also assistive technologies. And we have a wide range of access arrangements that can be offered students, including support with reading, writing, and extra time. Every adult in school has a key role in modelling good routines and consistent behaviours, and has a key role in shaping well-regulated students in school. Evidence informs us that SEND learners are particularly vulnerable to inconsistency, variability, and unannounced change. Indeed, these variabilities can contribute to a SEND student's feelings of well-being and safety in school. A key part of our professional development should be in developing and shaping a common language and approaches to engage with all students, but particularly those with SEND, who we know have particular barriers, particularly communication. And while a teacher may not have SEND learners in a particular class that they teach, they are part of the wider school community and must be able to role model consistent behaviours to all learners. Likewise, the effort made in this work should be replicated in the standards expected from our students as well. When we think about fulfilling our wider professional responsibilities, Let's look at this from the prism of a SEND learner. What opportunities do SEND learners have in our school to build their academic, social and cultural capital? And this academic, social and cultural capital provides added value in our classroom. So what opportunities as a school community, are we providing our SEND learners to flourish and thrive? I want to put some of this to our special guest today, Amanda Wright, Head of Whole School SEND. So I'd like to welcome now Amanda Wright to the Mercy Trust. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you, Conrad. Thanks. Nice to be here with you all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda, can you just introduce yourself and what you do, what your role is?
Sure. So as Conrad said, my name's Amanda Wright, and I am Head of Whole School SEND, which is part of NASON. I've been Head of Whole School SEND for maybe 4 months now, but I've been part of Whole School SEND since its inception back in 2018, when I was just like Conrad, one of the deputy regional leads for the West Midlands. But unlike Conrad, my background is in primary education. So I've worked in primary schools for over 20 years. I was a SENCO for around 15 of those. And then for the last 2 years, I've actually been out of schools working on this side. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's brilliant. That was very succinct, Amanda. Amanda, just tell us a little bit more about what Whole School SEND does. You've said they're the contract holder, the DFE, the workforce, but what do they do? What does it look like?
So yeah, Whole School SEND delivers the DFE funded Universal SEND Services Programme, and that is a SEND specific CPD programme designed for the school and college workforce at every level: learning support assistants, teachers, SENCOs, leaders, and the aim of all of the CPD that's delivered under this programme is to improve outcomes for children and young people with SEND. And the aim, or the way that we go about that, is by increasing confidence in the workforce through the CPD that we offer, and improving that early identification of need so that provision can be made at an earlier and more effective stage.
Absolutely, Amanda. Amanda, in an earlier slide, I introduced colleagues to what I'd probably consider one of the most challenging pieces of data, and that is around adulthood employment for young adults with learning needs. Yeah. And it's roughly working out that we've got sustained employment for more than 2 years at about 4.8%, 5%, which is a very, very low figure, and something I know we're all committed to changing. Just tell me a little bit about what Whole School SEND are doing around preparation for adulthood, some of that work.
Well, that's interesting, Conrad, because that preparation for adulthood, or that specific agenda, was quite new to Whole School SEND under this new contract that we have with the DFE, and so we have some specific projects around supporting schools to evaluate their own practice in terms of preparation for adulthood, using one of the review guides that Whole School SEND developed a few years ago with the support of NDTI, which is preparation for adulthood from the earliest years. And I suppose the big driver behind that is that it needs to happen early, right from the start, not just at those key transition points, but right from those earliest years. Schools should be thinking about what they're doing to prepare their young people for adulthood. And I know from my experience in primary school, it happens. We just don't call it preparation for adulthood. The skills and that young children are developing through the foundation stage, for example, are all about learning independence, and that's preparation for adulthood. But if schools, I think, start to recognise what they're doing and the reason that they're doing it, they're going to be more aware of what those next steps could be for their learners. And transition into adulthood and employment is a big part of the project.
There's an argument to say that every meaningful conversation with an adult is preparation for adulthood, isn't it? But we know we've got some challenges ahead there, and it's If anybody's interested, colleagues, in the work that Whole School Send are doing around preparation for adulthood, Whole School Send is free to join. So if you go to wholeschoolsend.org,
I believe so, or just Google Whole School
Whole School
Send and you'll
Send,
find us.
you can
Yeah.
sign up for free, and there's a whole world of resources. And there is a YouTube channel with all sorts of resources around Whole School Send. And they're very, very useful indeed. Amanda, can I just turn to the topic that we've got under discussion today, the topic for this session in our 6-part CPD series, which is every teacher a teacher's set of Send, every leader a leader of Send. And we know that this term sort of evolved from the 2014 Send reforms. It doesn't actually exist as a term in the 2014 reforms, but I think it came about as a response to needing to improve teaching, need to improve the school approach to Send. And what I've posited with colleagues is whether that term is still relevant, and we've sort of introduced this idea about every school being a school for Send, which sort of fits the kind of inclusion model and so on. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that time's up now on every teacher a teacher, Send, every leader, or do you think there is still some relevance in pushing that as a term that we should be using to describe our approach to Send?
Well, you're absolutely right. I don't think that phrase, every teacher a teacher of Send, appears in the Send Code of Practice. However, it does talk about teachers having responsibility for all of the children in their classes, and that the first approach to teaching children and young people with Send is high quality teaching. So I think that's where the term, the snappy phrase, every teacher a teacher of Send, came from. Is it still relevant? Yes, it absolutely is. I hear what you say about are we moving on, and you're right in the term, in so much as that, you know, we are moving on. Teachers' standards talk about adaptive teaching. You know, it's embedded in what our profession is about. But in practice, is it happening in every single school? Not yet. So, you know, I think the phrase still is relevant. But actually, it needs to go beyond that. So learners with Send don't their time in school. Some of it is spent in lessons, but an awful lot of that school experience is spent beyond those classroom walls, in assemblies, at break times, after school clubs, trips, residentials. And I suppose if we focus on every teacher being a teacher of Send, we're confining that to that time spent in the classroom. Well, we want to make sure that that experience through all aspects of their school life is inclusive, that they have that sense of belonging in every single aspect of their school life. Only then will they be fully prepared for that next stage, whatever it may be, and are we doing our, you know, our bit in preparing them for adulthood.
Now, one of our colleagues, Nicole Dempsey, talks about if we still need the term inclusion, we're nowhere near it. It's when that term becomes redundant that we're truly an inclusive school. So when we think about Send learners, and their participation in school, do we think where do you think our deficits are? Do you think we're doing anywhere enough in terms of building a school community around all learners, including Send learners? What steps do we need to take?
Well, interesting you should mention Nicole, because I have learned an awful lot from Nicole's practice and her vision around what inclusion is. And you're right, and colleagues on the call, if you're not aware of Nicole Dempsey, she's one of our deputy regional leads in Lancashire and West Yorkshire, but she's also the Send and Safeguarding lead at the Dixon's Academy Trust, and her own school is in Bradford. They do visits, and I learned a lot from going and seeing the practice there. And something Nicole talked about, which sits with me, I suppose, is about inclusion being a journey. And if you think that you've got inclusion right, then you haven't got inclusion right, because there'll always be some children sitting around the the outside, or the outliers who are still not quite able to engage fully in your offer. So yeah, just look Nicole up. She writes lots of articles and things. I think it's really interesting to hear how they do it. So what did you say? What are the deficits that we're still facing in the system?
Because we've still got a system where we have more SEND learners, and we have a system really where outcomes are really poor. So on the whole, so things have gone wrong. Now, is it the provision? Is it the teaching? Or is it the actual the way that schools approach their organisation around SEND? Do you think that schools actually look at the whole structure and think about where do our SEND learners fit in that? Where will they thrive, not just survive? What do we?
Yeah, it's a really complex picture, isn't it? Because we know that schools are only one part of a child's life, and I think if we're thinking about the big picture, society's got a part to play in the outcomes of all children and young people, but especially those more vulnerable learners who maybe opportunities are limited beyond school. So I suppose one answer would be we've got to look to work as widely as we can and be as outward facing as we can with schools to really look at that holistic approach for all services or organisations that are involved with children. But you're right, again, outcomes aren't great for this group of children, and not just academic, in terms of exclusion data, attendance data. It's always the children, young people with SEND who seem to be most represented in those pots of figures. So what can schools do? Be aware of it. Constantly look, for ways to develop their practice. Being on this call, I'm sure, Conrad, will go some way to help the schools that are working in your trust to maximize the opportunities for those.
One of the things I've been talking about in earlier slides is preparedness. Preparedness in working with learners, because they have such complexity, a lot of our learners, that they will have very spiky profiles, which means that often the way they respond to different stimuli, adult stimuli, will vary as well. So that in one setting something may work in DT, but it may not work the same way in chemistry, for example. And actually the sharing of knowledge within the school, and also adding on the knowledge outside of school in the wider community, particularly parental information, is a key sort of thread in that approach to understanding what our learners need. And again, it's around understanding how your provision will change, because the learners themselves don't change. It's around actually the appropriate provision, isn't it? And then understanding how that provision must change to suit how our learners traverse the school day.
Yeah, and I think constantly striving to learn about the individuals that you're working with in the most holistic way possible. I was talking with a colleague the other day about those learners who travel to school through transport provided by the local authority, and how sometimes the smallest change to that to the transport could actually have a really big impact on the young person and then how they present in school. So the example we spoke about was a young boy who was used to getting a taxi by himself. There were some changes, and then the next week, he was joined by 3 other young people in the taxi, one of whom he knew, and they really didn't get on well together. There was no chaperone in the taxi, so you can imagine a 30-minute journey, how that bottle was being shaken up, and him then entering school in a completely different mindset to how he had been the previous week. And if staff aren't aware of that, you can just see what's likely to happen.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Those small changes can have a big, maybe not at that time, but later on in the day or at home, so often parents will report how a pupil, how their son or daughter decompresses at home because of some of the challenges that they faced in the school day. So absolutely right. It's how do we forward plan, but also understand when things have gone wrong and change that. Amanda, I'm going to ask you a crystal ball question because, you know, I've talked about the SEND Code of Practice being almost 10 years old.
Yeah.
Not going to ask you when a new one's going to come along, because that might be some time away now. But in between times, we've had government publishing documents and consultation documents and so on. What are you looking for in the sort of next incarnation? What would you like to see? You know, broad brush things that you would like to see introduced in that. That, you know, I mean, for me, preparation for adulthood needs to have a continued prominence because of the challenges, societal challenges around so many young people with learning difficulties who do not have meaningful lives beyond school or college because they're not economically active and so on. What are your things? What things are you looking for?
Okay, I'm going to pick up two things. One, I think the strategic role of the SENCO needs to be continued to be pushed. And again, I think there's probably differences in the SENCO role in secondary schools as there are in primary, but I know whichever setting you're in, often it can become more of an admin task. And I think actually that push to making sure SENCOs are on a senior leadership team so that they can drive the strategy throughout the setting. I think that needs to remain. We know there's been changes in the qualifications that SENCOs need to achieve now. So I suppose we wait and see, does that have any impact? But as far as I know, it's still good practice. It's still considered best practice to have a SENCO on a senior leadership team, but it's not mandated anywhere. So, you know, let's hope that this continues to be a push for the SENCO to be a strategic role within a school. And I think the other thing that I hope stays a high priority, as it sits within preparation for adulthood, but it's around transition. I think there's more that we could do to support those key changes in phases. So, you know, into school at a reception age, primary to secondary, and then secondary to post 16. I think there's a lot more that can be done there. I think the key behind it, Conrad, is resourcing it properly.
One of the things I know,
staff the time to do it well.
SENCO turnover has been an incredible, particularly at primary phase as well. Lots of challenges, and I do facilitate on some of the MPQ programs, and the MPQ programs talk a lot about change, about leading change programs, but time is a key element in all that. Without the time to be able to implement the strategic role, as you've said, that SENCOs don't have because they're often wearing many hats, including classroom teacher and so on and so forth, is a real challenge. We've also got digitisation of EHCPs possibly coming down. Do you think that will be a benefit to?
Probably not the best day to ask me that because I've had some terrible tech problems this morning. I think standardisation of education, health and care plans is definitely a positive. So if it's done well, that would be great, wouldn't it? And actually, is there learning there beyond that group with education, health and care plans into a system that is consistent for those at SEN support as well? It's so the standardization of it, yes. The digitalization of it, if it works well, and is it accessible to everybody? Because we know there's still families out there who don't have that access.
And often for me, really, digitization will be important. It's actually the content of a plan, which is
exactly. Yeah, spot on.
Amanda, thank you very much. I've taken up so much of your time, but thank you for making yourself available today to talk to us here at the Mercy Trust, and all the very best in your new role as leader of Whole School SEND.
Thanks, Conrad. Always a pleasure. And I hope the rest of your course goes well. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
So my reflections there on talking to Amanda are many. We talked about the phraseology, the terminology, which is really important, that has grown from the SEND reforms in 2014. She feels it's probably too early to move on from the every teacher, a teacher of SEND model, for reasons that we still need to keep the focus around high quality teaching. She's right. There's a lot of evidence to say that high quality teaching is the prime mover for outcomes for SEND learners. But then recognises also that without really strong whole school processes and procedures about understanding how our SEND learners move through the school day, then the situation only becomes more challenging. So SEND learner complexity is growing, and as Amanda said, sharing information. She mentioned the example with the boy who had a transport change. Those small things can have such a big impact. So sharing information, sharing key information from parents through to school, between adults in school about our learners, is really important. And the earlier we intervene when problems arise, the better chance we've got of success. And that consistency with adults, we need to consistently role model those behaviours. What we do know, just reminding ourselves of the evidence base, actually inconsistency leads to greater vulnerability for the most vulnerable learners. So modelling and role modelling the most consistent behaviours is really important. So moving on to session 3, we will consider whether a learner does have SEND. Is it SEND or something else? We have a learner that's not making progress. How do we tell? What processes should we follow that enable us to determine whether a learner has a learning need or it's something else? Look forward to seeing you all very soon.